Our next speaker is Keith DeSherry. Keith is a Process Control and Automation Director for BASF in North America. He holds an electrical engineering degree from Louisiana State University and has been with BASF since 1988. During his tenure, Keith has held several engineering and management positions. Currently, Keith and his team have responsibility for improvements, standards, expertise, and services for all control system assets at BASF's 110 North American sites. He's also a member of BASF's Global Services Platform team that looks at process control and automation issues across their company's operations. Beyond the job description, Keith is a friend of PAS who has a great feel for how solutions and technology can be effectively implemented and utilized. He communicates well between control room and management, technical and commercial, customer and partner. Please join me in welcoming Keith DeSherry, who will provide his perspectives on automation and automation security.
One second. I gotta finish sending this email back out because I want $500,000, and all I have to do is send my bank account and the login information for my bank. So 1 second. So I don't need to do this anymore. Good night. I don't need to do this anymore because I just want $1,000,000. So, I'm thankful. Is Angela still in here or did she leave? She just left. She clarified something for me that FBI email I received earlier last week was spam. So I do not have to report to an agent within 30 days. So, all right, I'm going to take you through a little trip in my mind, which is scary, and talk a little bit about the difference that I see in what's going on in technology and the technology evolution within industry and then within the personal world, or at least my personal world. If we look back on industry, back when I started at BASF Corporation, we had pretty much pneumatics when I came into the plant I came into. We had pneumatic boards. Data sharing mean you went to the control room and you looked at the board. There was limited access to that data, limited access to the control room. And so things were pretty safe, pretty calm, pretty secure. If you go back in time as well to our personal lives, data wasn't as active and as easy to get to as it is today. So that data sharing didn't really happen. An event happened in the West Coast, might be a couple days before we found out on the Gulf South. Good part about that is that we didn't have a bunch of what I call copycat issues going on in the world. As we move into the age of electronics, accuracy got better than what we had with pneumatics. We started to see a whole lot more data being available to a whole lot more people. And then, of course, with that comes the risk of securing that data. On the personal side, we get up-to-the-minute news. So somebody in California passes gas, we find out about it 2.5 minutes later. Nothing like getting that up-to-the-minute data right at your fingertips. You can just sit on the internet and you can find out what's happening within minutes of it happening. That's great. But for me, that means anybody out there can learn anything about any facet of my personal life. That's not so good, especially if you live the life I live. So, what's happening on both extremes is a technology evolution. And Eddie talked about this earlier, where we have data that is just flooding. And what do we do with all this data that's coming in? With that data flood comes what data is critical and what data is not critical. What data can we let the public see? What data we can't let the public see? How do we control that? How do we control the risk with that? How do we control the security aspects of that? So this is just my little brief look as we go. If you look back on industry, back when I started at BASF Corporation, we had pretty much pneumatics when I came into the plant I came into. We had pneumatics. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about more personal from my aspect of how technology is evolving. When we look at all the aspects of the technology I just described, is that good or bad? Hello? It's both. Somebody cheated and saw my slide. So with connectivity comes the risk, of course. And we all want to live in a world. I mean, I've been sitting with my company for quite a long period of time talking about the ability to remote control facilities, remote control our plants, increasing remote access. And my group will get a kick out of this because I always say this, and I'm going to do it again today. One of the things I became, I wouldn't call it famous, but I became a nuisance to my people in my company was the fact that everybody wanted to have remote access to the control system in the control room from their desktop. When I started with BASF, that wasn't possible. What I had to do is basically pick my blankety blank up out of my chair and go over to the control room and see what was going on. Well, now everybody wants that remote access. Everybody doesn't want to leave where they're sitting, and they want to have the availability to see all that data, good and bad. Of course, my little picture says more than what this bullet item says, but with all this connectivity, with all this remote access, we're basically giving access. We're opening windows, we're opening ports, and we're developing a system that becomes less manageable for a control systems engineer because everybody wants a piece of it. So we open up those windows, we open up those doors, and everybody's climbing in. How do you manage that? How do you keep things under control? With that, though, more people get data, we make better decisions. So you have that excess of data. We're capable of making better decisions. People collaborate a lot better. We can collaborate across the globe because we're sharing data now. Experts for my company, experts in Germany can now talk to experts over in the US and solve problems because they're looking at the same data. That data is accessible to them. So that's always a good thing. Then again, we have a bad side. We're handing out the keys to our automation systems to everybody. So how do we manage that? How do we keep things in perspective as they change in our control systems? The good part, I love challenges. And now we have new challenges within the industry. We have new challenges within the automation realm that we didn't have when I first started. As Eddie said again, we have a data flood. We have lots and lots of data. And how do we start connecting this data and still hold true to that individual personal effect that I started with in the business and that kind of set my career? That data being out there is a good thing. The accessibility, as Angela was talking about, to that data becomes a scary thing. And for me, from a safety perspective, it becomes real scary because for me, security and safety go hand in hand. So we have to be wary of the demon that lurks behind the data. And so anything we do within automation and anything we do within our control systems, we have to always keep in mind that there's somebody, somewhere, somehow, who's just out there to get us. And we have to have that perspective when we look at our control systems because anything that comes out and gets to our control systems affects safety. And it affects the brothers and sisters that I have working in those facilities across the United States. I like the Big Bang Theory, so I'm going to tell you all a little bit about, within industry, the Big Buck Theory, and that's increasing profitability. My company does it. I'm sure every company out there is trying to do the same thing. The whole focus of our board of directors is to make money. The whole focus of any company is to make money. On the industry side, what I see is we need to find low-cost providers. We need to find the lowest cost provider. We need to bid everything. We need to choose the lowest bidder. We need to focus totally on reducing personnel costs, reducing as many people as possible. On the personal world, I was brought up by my mom and dad who basically said, you get what you pay for. And I think that's very true. I don't think that you can say that I'm going to go get the cheapest and that it's going to be sufficient over a lifetime of whatever that particular product is. So it's not about the cheapest for me. It's about what value you get out of it, what lifelong value you're going to get out of whatever product you purchase. And on the industry side, it's developed into cost versus functionality. It's more about identifying what is out there that we all feel can actually make a pound of product. But it's not about, or it's trending, not about how do we keep that reliability up? How do we keep that through a life cycle of an automation system? We talk about automation systems being able to go for a 15-year life cycle. I question that when we approach it from the standpoint of cheapest supplier. On a personal side, you want to buy something that's long-term. If you didn't, we'd still have Yugos on the market as far as automobiles. But they're not, because it was cheap, and it was made cheap, and it didn't last long. So on a personal side, that's what you want to do. You want to have what adds value to your life. The other thing that you also look at from a personal side is you want to have information held close in. And Angela talked about that a lot a little while ago, is the fact that you don't want your personal information, your bank accounts, everything, you don't want that out to the general public. You want that held true to your family. You want it to on a need-to-know basis. That's different than industry. And one of the biggest things that I'm not a part of, I am a part of LinkedIn, but I'm not a part of Facebook because, you know, a while back when Facebook took off, I thought about a career change. I thought about maybe I should go out of engineering and become a thief. Because my neighbors were broadcasting pictures from Orlando, Florida, and talking about how a good time it is and just having a blast, all the families over here. And I'm saying, well, I like that 52-inch TV they bought just a while back. I might go see if I can grab that and put it in my house. I'm not serious. I wasn't thinking about being a thief. But I think thieves really like the social media that we have out there now, because it's very easy, as Angela was pointing out, to figure out what's going on in a person's life, because we post it everywhere, whether it's Twitter or Facebook. When it comes to overall connectivity and my overall viewpoint on industry and where I'm going with this presentation, my goal would be to put what I have on the personal side of this slide, which is human interaction, back into the mix on the industry side. Because it is connecting the dots. It's connecting the dots, as they said earlier in the presentation for PAS, and the focus of this conference this year. We want to have the capability of technology, but we can't forget the human factor. I'll add one more thing to that as far as the human factor, and this is a conversation I just recently had within my own company. You know, we talk about increasing and having remote control of some of our facilities and some of our plants. And I was sitting in a meeting and we were talking about this, and we were talking about, yeah, you know, you do this and we do this section for automation, and then we can probably get rid of 1 FTE. And then we do this one over here and probably get rid of 3 FTEs. And I thought about it a little while, and then I told everybody at the table, I said, if we keep focusing on a reduction of FTEs, and we add to the unemployment, who's going to buy the product? We're going to continue making product, but we keep putting people out of jobs. There's a balance. There's a balance that has to be realized. So we have to use technology. We have to gain these possibilities, but you know, it's like the Lion King. You know, it's the circle of life. You got to have somebody to buy. So I get to Marion's pretty pyramid. This is the basis what BASF looks at when we start to talk about automation strategy and where we want to go and the roadmaps we build for those 110 sites that were mentioned earlier. When we look at it, we look at a basic functionality. We try to go to all of our sites and we try to look for them and say, what are the basic functions that we as BASF want to see in operation and going on within our facilities? And then we start to try to develop these sites into going further up this pyramid to advance in functionality, to system advancements, and to overall advancements in technology. Each member of my group realizes, too, that anything we look at on our roadmap has to be tested, has to be piloted. We have to prove it. We have to prove it adds value, number one, to our manufacturing community, and number two, of course, to the bottom line for the company. There's a lot more that goes behind this pyramid, but the one thing I don't like about Marion's pyramid is automation security is shown going up and down this pyramid, which is true, but it wraps all the way around it, because as we get more and more data out on the internet, with internal to the plant, or the internet, we have to make sure that we bound everything with security. So it's very important to our strategy. It's very important to the path forward we do within our facilities. So what are our overall goals that my group, MSS, Process Control and Automation, have gotten from the manufacturing community of BASF? Was basically to try to achieve things at a higher level, which is probably what most companies do. We want to have a level of throughput and quality for our production units. We want effectiveness for our operation crews and supporting personnel. We want to fully utilize our assets. And of course, we want to increase the reliability and availability, which is big, and it's a big key for me. It's a big push on my group, because that's where I think we gain. It's not so much through remote control. It's not much through providing, the availability to reduce personnel. It's really, if we increase the reliability of our equipment, we're going to see better profits. And that's the focus where I try to keep my group lined. What are our challenges? There's many challenges. You've already heard a bunch of speakers talk about the challenges that we have today. We have this massive amount of data. How do we get it to the right people? How do we make sure we manage it? The openness, the connectivity that we have in our systems. How do we control that? How do we make sure only the appropriate people are getting to the data and are able to change data? How do we make sure of that? This is all challenges that we're faced. And that's where PAS comes in for BASF. They have started to develop tools, some of which we are using today, that enable us to try to manage this data and put it in a visual aspect that all employees within BASF who need this data can understand. The first thing we did with PAS that I would say took a culture change was we started to use better visualization for our operators. And that was a culture shock for engineers. And it's still today. It's still something we battle at all of our sites. My philosophy on this is no longer will we, engineers, build the tools for our operators. We're going to let the operators select their own tools. They do it 24/7. I don't. I used to think I was the best graphics builder in the world when I started as an engineer. Now I know I was probably maybe one of the worst. I don't want an operator to give me my tools to do my engineering job. Therefore, I don't want to be an engineer giving an operator his tools. He needs to select his tools. I don't want to give him a hammer when he needs a screwdriver. So this is a big culture change for BASF because we're trying to take some of the role away from an engineer and give it to the person who actually needs it. And we still are challenged by this, but we're winning it over. And we're winning it over with the help of PAS. And I got to give Hector kudos wherever he's at, because I was very impressed at his ability in a short period of time to change the viewpoint and the stance of our operators. The massive amounts of data, one of the things we have, and I can honestly tell everybody in this group we're not fully utilizing yet. It's one of the pushes that I made in a one-on-one meeting with PAS yesterday, but we have utilized PAS's integrity, some of the PAS integrity modules, very well at our Port Arthur facility. We're starting to use it at other facilities. But there's a lot more that we need to do with it. There's a lot more that I see we are capable of being able to do with the different modules of integrity. One of the things that is near and dear, and I expressed this to my team yesterday, is the ability to be able to manage that change. I talked about so many people having the keys to our control systems. Well, one of the things I need to be able to do, and one of the things I need to hand over to my sites, is that ability for those control systems engineers to understand what's been changed from version to version to version. And the ability within Integrity to reconcile and to basically show me discrepancies is key. It's key for me, it's key for my organization, and it's key for BASF, because that gives us some type of control of what's going on in our plants. So my push is to further that within the corporation across those 110 production sites and make that happen. Where are we going? We want to go further with a lot of the modules that are available from PAS. We want to be able to start evaluating from a system aspect, not just an engineering configuration aspect. So I want to be able to have the capability to have my control system engineers across all these sites be able to see what changes happen, what discrepancies they see within their control systems as quickly as possible, so they can validate changes that are legitimate and that we can get rid of potential additions to our control systems that may not be illegitimate, and just a source, another source for someone to try to compromise us. The wide open data access, and this is still something that I've had several discussions with Eddie on, and it's one of the things from BASF that we're pushing. My goal to increase reliability within BASF really gets around the fact of having the data in the right people's hands. And I'll share with you the example that I used with Eddie. I want the capability of my best rotating equipment engineer, reliability engineer in Germany, to sit in front of a whiteboard. And I want my best reliability engineer in the US to sit in front of a whiteboard. And I want them to be able to troubleshoot identical compressors from sister plants across the globe, because one of them's having an issue. And I want all that data that Eddie talked about, I want that data on the screen for them. I want them to be able to pull it up on that whiteboard. I want them to be able to pull that compressor up and notice the differences. Maybe there's a slight difference. Maybe there's a 3 centimeter difference in basically the diameter of the shaft. I want them to be able to see that while they're talking to each other, live. I want them to be able to see the process data live on those compressors, to see what's going on different from that plant in Europe to that plant in the US. I want those tools right at their fingertips so that they're not trying to guess what the other one's thinking. They're not trying to guess what the data is from one to the other. They're not trying to guess or even forget the fact there's actually slight differences between those two compressors. I want that across the board for all my reliability engineers. I want them to have the capability on the instrument side to look at systems side by side and be over the phone, where we don't have to fly people across the pond to be able to troubleshoot these things. And with that, of course, goes back to the slide that I told you I was worried about earlier. And that is this data, this connectivity data that exists out there, and all this data flood that we have. How do we control that? Because I only want it in the right people's hands. I don't want the data on those compressors to be in anybody's hands. I don't want a guy on the board of directors for BASF to be looking at the reliability data for the acetylene compressor in Geismar. Doesn't serve him any purpose. He doesn't know what he's looking at anyway. That was mean. He might know what he's looking at. So areas that that I think for me and in my group, and I think for all the industry, that we need to keep focus on. We have to be able to manage our control systems, our process control systems. I don't think we do a great job of that right now because things are changing too fast for us, technology-wise. So we have to get a better handle on it. That involves working together with engineers in the IT environment. These groups have to work together to be able to protect these systems from any type of intrusion. We have to be able to manage our system changes, and I talked about what I want to do. I think PAS has a great product with integrity and being able to see discrepancies, so I want to be able to do that. And we have to be able to control access rights. I can't just have it wide open. I can't give every engineer that comes into the plant access to my system and let him be able to configure and do whatever he wants. I have to be able to control that if I'm going to have solid, reliable systems. I want to make sure that anything we do takes advantage of technology, but it keeps every person that goes into a BASF facility within North America, or actually globally, because we are a global company, safe. I want them to go home to their families every day safe. And everything we've been talking about so far today, for me, all goes back to one thing: safety. I want to make sure we use technology, but we use it safely. And that's it for me.